Hi knitters, it's Mimi with Pastiche Knitwear, and today's video tutorial is going to be on fixing a dropped stitch in Stockinette. So we're going to just begin here. This is the beginning of week 3 of the Corona isolation, so I'm trying to do some videos to help keep you all moving. So let's learn how to pick up a drop stitch. So what I'm going to do is just take this one stitch here, I'm going to drop it off the tip of the needle, and I'm going to just let it fall down a few rows. I can already hear people screaming when I do this. Okay, so what you see is many horizontal strands that look like rungs of a ladder, and that's what a dropped stitch will look like. And it's actually pretty large. It's amazing how much space just one dropped stitch takes up. So the first thing we're going to do here is to rescue the loop. So I'm going to use my handy tool here. This is a Susan Bates tool. There's a knitting needle on one end and a crochet hook on the other. I love this tool. I use it all the time, every day. So I'm going to first, I want to make this stitch larger because I want to make it easier. So I'm just going to take the needle end of it and just pull up on the stitch. Now I'm going to come in the front of the stitch, making sure that the legs of that stitch are not twisted. So I'm going to come in the front door here. I'm going to pull this down out of my way, and I'm going to look for the horizontal strands. Now sometimes, I want to say this, sometimes these horizontal strands, it's harder to read them, or one might slop over the other. I pretty much always let my eye look at the left hand side here where the strand is coming out to make sure that I'm getting them in the proper order. So all I'm going to do is take my crochet hook and I'm going to dip underneath this first horizontal strand, and I'm going to pull that through that first rescued stitch. I'm going to do this all the way up, taking each horizontal strand in succession. I'm going to come under here, pull it through, and I yank up on it. It takes up the extra slack and makes it easier to pull the yarn through. So I'm going to do this all the way back up. Got 2 more to do. Now when we get up to the top and where we have picked up all the strands, we're going to drop this stitch back on the left hand needle. Now you would be inclined, let me get this out of the way here, you'd be inclined just to drop the stitch back like so, but if you do that and you look, that stitch is seated or mounted backwards. So when you're doing this, friends, bring your left needle tip in the front of the stitch and put it back on that way, and then the stitch is properly mounted. Okay, now that's an example of when a stitch has well and truly dropped. A lot of times what we will encounter, though, I'm going to go back and do a little mistake on purpose here to demonstrate for you. A lot of times what you will see is a slipped stitch, one where you don't actually have a live stitch that's flopping around, but you have somehow missed it. So what we're going to do here is, you can see on the front of this, you can see this elongated stitch here, and if I turn the work over, I can see this horizontal strand. Anytime you see a large elongated horizontal strand across the back of your work, that's a clue that you have dropped a stitch or slipped a stitch. So the fix is the same. Let's turn it back around. I'm just going to knock this off. And what happened is somewhere in the construction, it just didn't get caught. Something happened as it passed over, but you would just drop down until you saw all those horizontals, and we're just going to catch it rather than leave it uncaught. So we'll do the same thing. Bring the hook underneath and through, back up, and then again we're going to take the left needle into the front of that stitch so that it's properly mounted. And we have rescued that stitch. Now let me show you one other way. Sometimes, a lot of times, we've only dropped one stitch, or we've dropped one stitch one row down is maybe a better way to say that. And we don't have to go down several rows, we just have to rescue one. And let me show you how to rescue a stitch with just your knitting needles rather than having to use another tool. Because there are times, I'm sitting on a couch and I just don't want to get up and have to find my tools. So anyway, so what you would do here is, here's our horizontal strand across the back, we can see it. I'm going to slip this stitch onto the right hand needle. Now I'm going to take the right needle tip and I'm going to just come underneath that horizontal strand of the dropped stitch. And now, like a bind off, I'm going to take my left needle tip, hop over that first stitch, come into the second, pull it up, over and off. Once again, we need to transfer this stitch, it will not have been worked, back onto the left-hand needle, and we come into the front of it. And that's it. That's your different scenarios on how to pick up a dropped stitch in stockinette stitch. I hope this has been super helpful for you. As always, if these videos are helpful, please consider subscribing. Thanks.